So, this is Joel Chestnut again on my episode here of looking at Kenyan athletes abroad, locally, and in any competition that was on the horizon. In my last episode, I suggested to the idea or to the whole narrative of Kenyan athletes in particular and how we have this self-defeating process that has plagued us, and as we've plateaued over the years, that we are not producing quality, but we are producing quantity. And I'll give you a background to how the Kenya psyche works. And I think it's an observation I've done over the years on how Kenyans look at themselves. It's a psychological aspect that I think will speak to why I'm very concerned moving forward as a Kenyan and as an American, as an observer of athletics in Kenya in particular. And so, growing up, we Kenyans struggle with diversification, we struggle with quality, we struggle with looking at different perspective. We are very homogeneous. We are driven in a village mentality to an extent that it can be self-defeating. It can be a sabotage approach to everything. So let me give you a hint. Let me give you just a very basic way of Kenyan looks at life in general. So because of how we are culturally and traditionally, we see things as a whole, and there's no gray area, there's no really difference, so to speak. If you see somebody's house, if you see somebody's hut made out of grass, you see the same all over the area. So it's a massive way of looking at the landscape of the same, so to speak. And I think this sameness is so embedded, is so deep in the way we see things. And I don't think Kenya has a monopoly on how we look at life in general. Even in America here, you have a neighborhood that is almost like a cookie cutter. Okay, so I'm not saying particularly Kenya owns this corner of the market, but I'll give you a basic outlook on growing up as a Kenyan, how people look at life. So when I was growing up, at a certain point, we people planted sukuma wiki, which is the kale you buy in the store. And when kale is grown, sometimes we had a market that you take and you get some. This could be a good day for that market day, and because a good day on that market day, the pay could be great, and so you get this spike on the sukuma wiki for that day. And so when you come home, you spread the news that the market was great today. I sold my sukuma wiki. Maybe you had 10 sacks and the price was incredible. And you are celebrating. You come to the neighborhood, and people know that you are a good one because we always saying we celebrate this accomplishment, this milestone we've hit of selling sukuma wiki, which was just kale. You've harvested from your land, you've gone to the market. I used to go to Eldoret, maybe with 10 sacks, 7 sacks, depending on how many you have. Maybe it's not just me, but maybe a neighborhood of neighbors with me went out there to the market, in that big market of Eldoret, which was the big city or the big town next to our house. And so you sell that, you come home, you're celebrating, people find about it. The next day or the next few days, people we want to go and replicate or do what you did, which is take what they have, they harvest the next few days will be great, and so they'll go to the same market and they'll flood the market with the same product, sukuma wiki, and the market will plummet. So what you thought you are the only one or a few of you had it, the next few days everybody has done the same thing. So the neighbors would be like, let's plant sukuma wiki, let's harvest sukuma wiki. The market was great a few days ago. And they ran to the same market. And because of the saturation and the mass production of sukuma wiki, the market plummets. That's how things happen. People see neighbors doing maybe chicken, there's a lot of chickens. They see eggs, a lot of eggs. And the prices go down because there's too many of that. That's Kenya for you from that perspective that I observed growing up. The same thing with Mutumba, the same thing with second-hand clothing, which is here and maybe it's Goodwill. If you've come up with a business idea, you're gonna do it. Somebody else in the neighborhood will be like, "Oh, Kimboy is doing it. I'm gonna go do it too." And before you know it, everybody almost is doing it because they say you are successful. We wanna be successful. So you have this replication, this idea of duplication, this idea of saturation, and the market and the prices plummet because there are too many of the same product. It goes again. Let me tell you something. Even now in Kenya, in 2000, when Kibaki came into power, he introduced a very soft approach to buying motorbikes, border border, which has revolutionized, radicalized, changed the transportation mode in Kenya. We used to have matatus. They were very popular. They were a dominant mode of transportation from one end to another. Because of border border and how loans could be taken, how people could purchase it and how they could pay for it, the market in a few years was flooded with border border. Border border, if you go right now to Kenya, is the mode of transportation for many people, mostly in the rural areas and small towns. To a point whereby there are so many border borders, so many of them owned by individuals, and the market is flooded and saturated to the point whereby some are just sitting around the whole day. You'll be lucky if you get a dollar or two because there are too many of them and they are taking the same route, they are going the same places, so you are fighting for that small niche. And the buying power, the economic power within the population is so weak, and yet you have this border mode of transportation that has changed the way Kenyans move. It has penetrated some areas that were not penetratable back then, but at the same time we have too many of them. So I'm giving you this background to tell you that Kenyans struggle with duplications, this idea of saturation. They saturate the market. Diversification, being different, is not very Kenyan. For instance, tea as a crop, a cash crop in Kenya. Back in the days, it was the big companies, KTDA, Kenya Tea Development, Kenya Tea Development Association. You have Brook Bond, Nandi Tea. All these tea companies were the major cash crop owners of tea. That has changed because now we have individuals who own tea plantations, and it's been promoted by the government. In fact, it's owned right now by the government. Government is the new Mansito. Is it Mansatiro, whatever that company is that owns the seed? Kenya owns all the tea crops, so to speak. You cannot do it otherwise. It has to the government. At the same time, the market has not been fair to the farmers because there are too many of tea planters and tea crop. So you have too many borders, you have too many sukuma wiki planters. Everything in Kenya is duplication, saturation. The prices tend not to favor when you have too many. So we become the new China, so to speak, where we have mass production and very minimal quality. Let me take you to athletics. Let me take you to the runners world. What do you think Kenya is known for? Runners. It is a country that people say, oh, you are from Kenya, so you run. So we have mass production. We have mass number of athletes. I have a question for you. If I give you the background of motorbikes and border and tea plantation and sukuma wiki, and the idea that Kenya seems just to be in masses, do you think the quality of athletes is great? I'm just asking that question. Is it great? Does it live up to the standards now? If you look at the Olympics last year, how many Kenyans really had quality that could be medal quality? There are few. Yet we have many athletes. We produce massive amount of athletes. We just seem to going through the, what do you call them, production belt. And it's become almost a mantra. It's become almost like a pride that we just have massive numbers of athletes. Moving forward, it's not sustainable. You can only have so many in the world. You can only have so many Kenyans running in the world. That's why in my last episode, I kind of hinted or suggested that this trend is not sustainable, that we are going to have numbers of athletes all over the world. The question is, do they have the quality to be the top runners of the world when it comes to medals, Olympics, when it comes to World Championship? Yes, we compete, but are we able to be that top athlete? Do we have the facilities to refine the product, so to speak? And that's the challenge we face. Because I'll give you an example, okay? Let me give you an example. Back in the days, we had people like Peter Ono, or no, Andrew Ono, for instance. He could run 5,000, 10,000 steeplechase, 3,000 steeplechase. He was very diverse, and he's a very rare breed, and he could compete in many events. Now you have people like Jakob Ingebrigtsen from Norway. He can compete 1,500, 5,000. He can even do 10,000. Now he just did a half marathon. That's exactly where I'm coming from. I'm suggesting that diversification is a good thing for Kenya if we could look at it critically. We cannot just continue thinking we are middle distance runners. Middle distance. And by the way, when I talk on middle distance, maybe 800, 15, we are becoming almost people who are just observing and competing and participating. Another example I'll give you is people like Wilson Kipketer, for instance. Let me give you an example. That's a very good example I'll come up with. Wilson Kipketer was a Kenyan originally. He was a good 800-meter runner in Kenya. And I think he sensed that he could not compete at the highest level in Kenya because the competition in Kenya is brutal. There are many 800-meter runners. You can only find one Rudisha. You can find one Wanyonyi. Or you find somebody like Emmanuel Korir. So we've produced just maybe that. But we can produce one good product. But we have so many of them. The question is, where are they going to go? Where do they go when the top seems to be very high to get? Where the pyramid, that pyramid is very hard to get. That's why when I talk of Wilson Kipketer, somebody like him decided to migrate to go to Denmark. He's not the only one. If you look at Bernard Lagat, he thought he would have a better chance coming to America. You hear of athletes went to Qatar back in the days. Bahrain, they've gone to Uganda, they've gone to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, whatever you call it. There's a Romanian Kenyan. I'm saying that we are forced to because, to be honest with you, I don't think we are into quality, we are into quantity. We have massive production of athletes. And all of them are fighting for that pie. They are fighting for that big pie. They are all Kenyans. And there's only one pie. And they are not the only ones who are running. There are other nationalities that are fighting for that pie. And that's why on my last episode, I was saying that the market is saturated. The question for Kenyans is not how they produce, is what value are they adding to the product, the athlete. What is special about a Kenya right now? Faith Kipyegon, she can run 1,500 meters. She can run 5,000. I have a feeling she can run 10,000. That adds value to a name. Beatrice Chebet, she can run 1,500. I suspect she can. She can run 5,000. She just proved that in the Olympics. And she won the 10,000. This is what I'm trying to suggest here. I'm just trying to say that unless Kenyans start to add value to their athletes, add some component, to realize that you have to diversify. We cannot just all be producing sukuma wiki. We cannot all be producing tea plantations. The market is saturated. People are looking for what have you added to this product. What do you why do you think I should have a Kenyan athletes come to my meet? We've been exposed in the Olympics, Kenyans. We've been exposed in the Olympics. Man could not add value to the fact that they were there. They were found wanting, they were exposed, they didn't have the quality to the next level. Other than a few that I just had mentioned, we had in the middle distance, I think we were all over the lanes, so to speak. We were in the Olympic village. But when you look at what we produce as a running world, as a running nation, it doesn't add up. And I think it speaks to this idea of quality and value, adding value. And I think if you look at somebody like, for instance, another example I'll give you is Eliud Kipchoge. Eliud Kipchoge had a 3:30 or better in 1500. He could run anything from 1500 to marathon. Do you know how long Kipchoge has been around? Almost 20-something years. It's because one thing Eliud Kipchoge did was add value to his athleticism. He wasn't just known for one thing. He started somewhere and he grew to be a legend, an icon. So I think the challenge Kenyans face is not that we don't have athletes. I think that the problem is that we have too many of them. That's the problem. And I think they come from the same vicinity, they come from the same landscape. I also even go as far as saying that I think Kenyans can find athletes all over the nation instead of just trying to think there's only an exclusive club that they can come from or an ethnic group. I would even go as far as saying that I think that has been our Achilles, our downfall, that we have not allowed other parts of the country to feel that they belong in this investment. If I remember too, is that in the 90s, 80s, Nyahururu, the central part of Kenya, was the epicenter. It was a training ground. It was where people went to look for talent. What have we done over the years? We've taken all that investment and taken it to one part of the Kenya nation, and we think that's the only mining ground. You can only mine so much. We know this from other mining grounds. You can only do so much before it is depleted of those mineral resources. You have to diversify. We have to go to different parts. We have to go to Turkana. We have to go to Mandera. We have to go to Makueni. We have to go to the coastal part of Kenya. There could be athletes there. We have to really go to Kisumu. I don't know, Kisii, we've gone there, Kilgoris. I'm talking of a nation that needs to look at all the corners of the nation to appreciate that we have, yes, talent. We have athletes, we have runners. We need to add value to it and diversify. Because I think yesterday too, if you remember, I talked about how the paying scale is not lucrative because we are not adding value to our athletes. So people are like, okay, you're a runner. What else? What else do you have that I can add? I can pay you more than I'm paying everybody else. So we have this plateau scale of payment. It's just flat. During my time, I'll tell you this. Sometimes you go to a race and they give you just hotel and maybe a few coins. Because we had too many of our Kenyan athletes in the same arena, the same playing field. It's hurting us. It's hurting Kenya to a point whereby until we ask ourselves the hard question is, what are we doing to add value to our athletes? We're going to be stagnated. Over the years, we might even get to be relevant. Over the years, we might just be participants without that glory because there's no value we've added to our athletes. And it all goes down to this infrastructure, the leadership, being reflective and ask, like you, for instance, let me ask you this. How could an American win a steeplechase medal when we had all those Kenyans? It's a good question. The world is catching up because they figured out how they can beat us in what we thought we own. 1500 meters, any other race you can talk about, I think it all speaks to the idea that we've been exposed. We've saturated the market, yes, with runners, but they're all just runners. It's like saying it's made in China. If it's made in China, sometimes you're looking at it like, the tag says it's made in China, or the tag is, a runner from Kenya. It's not a good thing when the world starts to see us Kenyans as ordinary. We might look good on newspapers, people talking about Kenya this, Kenya that, But if you look closely, we're not well paid. Why? Eliud Kipchoge might get well paid, but doesn't mean everybody else is getting well paid. We might win Boston, we might win New York Marathon, but that's just one. How many Kenyans are there? Do they have a good check to get or to take home? That's the big question we need to ask, and I don't think it's a question that is being asked. I'm asking this in this episode. I think it's a good question to ask. It's worth it because I'm invested in athletics in Kenya, and seeing just a few names being the face might tell us that we need to work more to bring others to fill up that space that is taken over by other countries. I think it's a reality check. It's a conversation that needs to happen, but it takes somebody who is invested in athletes. I think I could be one. I don't know. Somebody else might be. In fact, I was reading something in the Guardian newspaper. It's a newspaper I take interest in how they talk about how globally, athletes are being challenged by the way the climate is changing. If you look at the landscape in Kenya, it's not the same E10 where people train. Kaptagat is not the same grounds that has produced these great athletes. The air is changing, the air quality is changing. The landscape is changing because trees are being cut. The quality of the air is not the same. So altitude doesn't mean you're getting altitude. You might be struggling. And talking of struggling, there was an incident that is very sad. I read in the newspaper this morning of some young man, Willie Chalawa, who was found dead in his hotel in Kaptagat training ground, E10. The details are in the newspapers. I think he participated in the Nairobi Marathon that just happened last weekend. He was found dead. I don't know what the cause of his death was, but I'm more reporting this to add to the idea that the climate is changing. But we don't know. I'm just saying that I don't think what we have had in the past, the environment we've had in the past that have produced great athletes, is the same. So the challenge is within that we need to ask those questions on how can we adapt to the new world that is changing. The world has changed, Kenyans, and I don't think we're just going to produce the same runners. We cannot just say mass production is the way forward. We need to ask the deeper questions. How is science? How is the world looking at athletes? Where do we need to change and look at things differently? It's a challenge for most Kenyans, and I think it's a challenge that I'm just putting forward there. Hopefully, this conversation can find some traction, can find some room for us to talk about how do we add value to our athletes instead of just being participants and being known as a great country that produces runners. We need competitive runners in the landscape of athleticism. That was my episode today. I hope I challenged you a little bit. Joel Chestnut, episode number 56, saying the world is changing. We need to change too.